Okay, good evening and welcome to August. Nice to see everybody here. I'll call the meeting to order. It is 6 o'clock. If you could all join, let's do a roll call first.
Councilmember Edwards.
Here.
Councilmember Higley.
Here.
Councilmember Kelly. Here. Vice Mayor Harrod.
Here.
Mayor Mitchell.
Here. Now please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Edwards.
Yes.
Councilmember Higley.
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrod.
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell.
Yes. And report on closed session. We did have a closed session and direction was given to staff. Announcements and presentations. We don't have any tonight. City manager reports. On to Jeff.
Thank you, Mayor. A few updates. Welcome back to the council after a July recess. It's been a mostly quiet summer here, but I want to share a few things that have happened since we last met and a couple of things that are coming up. First off, for me, at least one of the highlights of this past July, and I know for several members of the council, was a new event that took place in town, the Guelaguetza, which was a celebration of Oaxacan culture and our Oaxacan community in Healdsburg and Sonoma County. That came off, in my opinion, really well. I know a lot of people, the organizers of that event and city staff worked really hard to pull it together. It was different in terms of costumes and dance and presentations. It was really different than anything I think we've done here before. And a good turnout. And again, it just came off really well. It was a beautiful day. So I wanted to just acknowledge that and thank everybody who worked hard on that. Tuesday concerts continue. We have a few more of those, but one thing I wanted to note is tomorrow is also National Night Out. We've always held off from doing large National Night Out gatherings because it's a Tuesday and we want to make sure people are already gathering on the plaza and we don't want to impact that. But something we've taken to doing in recent years is just having a law enforcement presence there so they can interact with the community and spend some time. That's really one of the goals of National Night Out, is to build those connections between public safety staff and members of the community. So we'll do that again tomorrow night. So you can look for an active presence from the police department, the fire department. I think they will have snacks or giveaways for community members and just be there to interact with people and chat and connect. So wanted to let everybody know that will be coming up tomorrow. One other public safety note is I think the council received an email about this last night, but there is an active fire in Lake County and did send an engine company up there as a strike team. So 3 members of our fire department were up there, 3 yesterday. I'm looking to the chief. They had not returned when I last checked. Okay. So if anyone didn't hear that, they're still staying up there tonight and we're expecting, hopefully they'll be released tomorrow. But big thanks to the members of our fire department who on obviously very short notice headed up there to help with mutual aid and assistance. So we appreciate that and we wish them well. And then last but not least, I just wanted to note one of the projects that's been really active over the last month. I hope council members and the community has seen it in lots of different locations around town. But the council approved a pretty significant contract this year for sidewalk gap closure and improvements. This is something we try to do every year. And depending on funding can do more or less, but we hit a lot of locations around town. This is the mundane work of governing, but awfully important to find areas where we're either missing sidewalk or have sidewalk that's deteriorating and creating a safety hazard. So we've hit a lot of those locations and we're just about to wrap that up. So I just wanted to note that since those projects can sometimes disappear quietly, and we're planning to do a summary of the locations and some before and after photographs in the city manager's update this week. So I will tease that for Friday's city manager update and hope everybody's ready to check out the sidewalk improvements. But it's, from my vantage point, been really great for us to be able to get out there and just hit a lot of locations around town. So hopefully everybody notices that somewhere where they travel. I think that's all I have for now. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jeff. Does anybody have questions for No? Okay, so we'll move on to public comments on items on the consent calendar and non-agenda items. This time is set aside to receive comments from the public regarding matters of general interest not on the agenda, but related to City Council business. Pursuant to the Brown Act, however, the City Council cannot consider any issues or take action on any requests during this comment period. Do we have any? Welcome.
I'm on? Yes, I'm on. More ways than one. No, I'm just kidding. I'm an avid cyclist. I've been cycling for years and years. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And I want to publicly thank Healdsburg and you all for filling a parking slot in front of Acorn Cafe with biking racks. You know, Healdsburg and Sonoma County is biking mecca. I know when I've done the Grand Fondos about 3-4 years ago, they had over 7,000 cyclists participate. And they come to Healdsburg and they go through Healdsburg and they stay in Healdsburg and they buy things in Healdsburg. So it's something I've been looking forward to have, and need several more around the city. It'd be wonderful. I had my $3,000 special Roubaix bike stolen June 18th, and 12 days later they found the culprit, and but without the bike. But regardless, if you have bike racks there, you can lock them up, which is wonderful. And also I want to thank Councilman Dave and Chris for volunteering for being the donkey as I was managing the dunk tank at this fabulous extravaganza 4th of July plaza party that we celebrated. And hopefully we can get volunteers again next year. Maybe, no, I won't say that. But anyways, thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Bridget Mansell, Healdsburg. So I just want to welcome you back. I also want to welcome myself back. Yesterday, I found out that I'm not going to be doing any more grandmother duty, so I'll be available Monday nights. So you'll see more of me. There's so much going on, and as you all know, the national certainly invites me to pay attention more to the local, because I feel like there's more of a difference I can make at the local level. So I think I'm hearing that from citizens as I volunteer around town and think about impending elections and what's happening with land use in our town. So I know I spent some time in July with city staff, a few people that were kind enough to meet with me about things like the depot and the SMART initiative and what's going to happen with that land. So I want you to be aware that I'm into transparency. I think you all know that. It's not just a word, it's a culture. And I'm really concerned about making sure that we do more to include people that are going to be affected by decisions. So I'm really proud of this council. I'm really proud of you all and what you did. I really appreciate you spending my tax dollars on the flyer, inviting our community to feel included. I was happy to get 2 of them, one for my son who doesn't even live at my address anymore. I hope he's not registered to vote still in Healdsburg because he doesn't live here, but I was happy to get both those. And I want to tell you how much I appreciate the vote that you all took, Mayor. Thank you so much, because I really didn't know where that vote was going to go. So as a citizen that really appreciated that third vote, because that's what it is when you're on council, you need that third vote. No problem, it's over. I hope it's over, that we believe we want to make this community a place where it's safe for our people that are actually holding up the economy, not just our Latino community, but also the hardworking middle class and hospitality workers that are really struggling. And I think tonight you're going to be addressing that with a local preference initiative that I think would be really healthy for us to adopt. We never really unpacked Measure O, and I am definitely a proponent of building housing, but I really want you to know that I don't like being characterized as anti-housing. I ran on that when I was running for election. And so I'm willing and really able, because I'm not on council, to be very active in how we continue to work toward getting the right kind of housing in Healdsburg. So I have faith in the mayor. I have faith, and I hope we get vice mayor to be mayor next year. I'll be there to advocate for that. I hope we get every one of you to support more inclusive policies around people knowing about things. And when I unpacked Measure O, it wasn't about being right. And I was no happy camper being on that ballot with some of the names that were on there. But I do want you to know that we're not going away. It's not a threat. I want to work with you all. I want to learn from you, and I want to definitely support you because where you are is exactly where you're meant to be. And I'm grateful for your service. So thank you and welcome back, Bridgette, to not being in East Bay taking care of a baby girl, but being here looking at my community. So Mayor, thank you for serving everybody and welcome back to work. We have lots to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm Mark McMullen, Parkland Farms. I'm here to ask the council tonight to agendize a discussion on the lane width options for March Avenue, for the March Avenue project. This is a project that the community has been actively engaged in for the past year and more. The May 15th community meeting demonstrated the value of public input. It led to meaningful improvements that would not have emerged unless we had that meeting. However, at the June 16th council meeting, Councilmember Kelly raised an important issue that revealed a gap in our community engagement process. The option for 10-foot lanes versus 11-foot lanes based on the NACDO guidelines. Here's the core issue. The community was never presented with the information about the 10-foot lane options as an alternative. We, the residents, cannot make meaningful input on choices if we do not know that they exist. The April W-Trans memo about the bike lanes presented the 11-foot bike lane or the 11-foot traffic lanes as a given without examining whether 10-foot lanes might better serve our community's long-term interest. I want to be clear, I'm not here advocating for 10 or 11-foot lanes tonight. Both options are designed via safety with safety as the primary motivation, and I respect that. What I'm requesting is the opportunity for our community to have complete information about both approaches so we can make the most informed decision possible. We still have time to really discover which path forward is the safest overall for Healdsburg. There is likely strong data supporting both approaches, and we simply need to get all that information out in front of the community. More complete information will give us the opportunity to make the best possible decision, whether it means staying with the 11-foot lanes or potentially adjusting to 10-foot lanes based on the evidence. This discussion will benefit not just this project, but establish our approach for every future street project in Healdsburg. I respectfully request that the council vote to agendize this lane width discussion so we can ensure that the community has access to all the information about this important decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Judy Fujita. I'm going to second what Mark requested. I request that you direct staff to agendize and conduct an analysis of 10-foot traffic lanes for the March Avenue reconstruction project before the final striping decisions are made. The review can occur without delaying the scheduled January 2026 start of construction and would ensure the city makes a fully informed decision that reflects evolving best practices in street design. Consider the following in support of 10-foot lanes. Improve safety through speed reduction, no increase in crash rates, national design standards support 10-foot lanes, it meets emergency access requirements, and lastly, March Avenue is not only a collector street, it's also a complete street, and as such, the needs of all, including pedestrians and cyclists, need to be considered equally with those of drivers. A shift to 10-foot lanes would create space for a wider buffer between motor vehicles and bicycle lanes. March Avenue is a key east-west corridor in Healdsburg used by school children, families, and residents accessing the hospital. Healdsburg Elementary School and neighborhoods. Creating safer conditions for people biking here would support our community's health, sustainability, and transportation goals. If the council chooses not to revisit this issue for March Avenue at this time, I urge you to adopt a formal policy that prioritizes 10-foot travel lanes in planning and design of all future road projects in Healdsburg where contextually appropriate.
Thank you. Welcome.
Welcome. My name is Doug Lyle. Thank you for having me here. I am specifically here to talk about advocating for the 10-foot lane width. And the reason for that is I'm part of the Move Healdsburg group, and I do believe our mission to make the city safer for pedestrians and cyclists, both for residents and for tourists, is a good mission. And I think we all deep down support it. I'm certainly no traffic expert or city design expert, so I spent the weekend Googling lane widths, traffics, all those kind of things. And I sent the 5 of you plus Mr. Zimmer and Mr. K an email earlier today with the information that I received that I Googled online. And the two sources I primarily used was the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Safety report and the National Association of City Transportation Offices, also known as NADCO, which I believe someone on this panel has actually referenced to at some point as being part of a design process. And what's interesting about the reports, one of the things that came out is that they found that most states' Department of Transportations follow just guidelines that have been established since maybe even I was a kid, which was a long time ago. There hasn't been any real update on the information about traffic safety, lane widths, and things like that. And they're saying that really what the biggest problem is, they don't use context. They just look at a street and say that should be X amount of feet wide, and they run with it. And this study actually refutes almost all of the long-held notions of how streets should be designed with modern data. And what was interesting about it, the most immediate candidate for reduction of a lane to 10 foot, they actually went down to 9 foot, but in the end, there's an issue with that I'll address in a second. That with the 10-foot lanes, it's a street that has a 20 to 25 mile an hour or a 30 to 35 mile an hour speed, which is pretty much Healdsburg streets. The conclusion was a 10-foot wide road is safer for vehicles because it tends to get people to slow down, and it's much safer for pedestrians because they're more likely to survive an accident, both injury or fatality. And the only negative that they could find with the 10-foot lanes was the perception from emergency vehicles. And Chief, I would understand your need for that. But their conclusion was that as long as it was an unobstructed 20-foot lane, that there was no risk for emergency vehicles or no detriment to emergency vehicles in their actual use. And the biggest takeaway was 10-foot lanes actually save lives and reduce accidents, which is pretty amazing. And I hope you'll listen to this information and take it into account when you make decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, council members, Mayor. My name is Session Holden. I'm here to speak about the 10-foot lanes on March Avenue, but also in general. I'll just ditto what Judy said, all the data. I just want to speak to the fact that, and some of you know that March Avenue down by Healdsburg, it takes a wavy turn. And whenever I get down there, I just feel unsafe. And I think the benefits of a 10-foot lane versus an 11-foot lane is psychological for the driver and the and people that are using the bike lane. It's just going to tell people slow down. And I know some people don't like to hear that, but it is a safety feature, and I will yield the rest of my time. Thank you all for your service.
Thank you. Welcome.
I'm Norm Fujita. I'm from Hillsburg. I haven't had the chance to go in depth in terms of all the information that's been presented, but it's been well articulated by the previous speakers. My concern is that I'm not sure there was enough community input with regards to the decision-making process from people that are really intimately involved with the cycling and the safety information. I do respect the time and effort that Larry Zimmer had put into looking at this issue with SDCA, his staff, and the consultants. And I'm not sure it's completely a black and white situation, although the bulk of the data seem to indicate the 10-foot traffic lane seems to be the safest. But there are some caveats, like with trucks and emergency vehicles and so forth. I would like to see agendized to look at it and analyze it. Once again, with this in mind, with respect to safety of both drivers, cyclists, and pedestrians. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Welcome.
Hello, good evening. My name is Marcy Flores, Executive Director at Corazon Hillsburg. And on behalf of Corazon Hillsburg, I would just like to come here tonight to share our deepest gratitude to the City of Hillsburg for nearly a decade of partnership. For the past years, your commitment through the Public Service Agreement and our lease agreement has been more than just funding. It has been a lifeline to Corazon and our community. And each year, your investment has allowed us to walk alongside our most marginalized neighbors, to open doors to resources they didn't know existed, and to remind families that they are seen, valued, and part of this community. And your leadership has been especially meaningful in these times when fear and uncertainty weigh heavily on our immigrant communities. The City of Hillsburg has shown courage and compassion by ensuring that every resident, regardless of their immigration status, knows they belong here. And through our civic leadership initiatives, we've been able to carry out outreach for city initiatives that makes sure families, no matter their language, their color of their skin, or their socioeconomic status, have a seat at the table. And together, we've created safe spaces where voices are not only heard, but valued. With your support, we've been able to provide vital programs and resources that change lives, from connecting parents and individuals to critical resources, to being there for families in moments of crisis and celebration alike. And none of this happens in isolation at Corazon. It happens because the City of Hillsburg has chosen year after year to stand shoulder to shoulder with us in building a more inclusive and compassionate and connected community. So tonight, I just want to say, as you consider our agreement moving forward, that you know that this is to support young leaders in our community. It's to empower individuals to find their voice, to step into leadership and inspire change. And it is investing in the next generation of changemakers who will carry forward the values of equity, compassion, and service that make Hillsburg stronger. And from the bottom of our hearts, we want to say thank you for fueling our mission, for believing in the power of community, and for leading with courage and compassion so that everyone in Hillsburg, no matter their background or circumstances, has the chance to thrive. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Not seeing anyone come forward. I'll go ahead and close public comment. Bring it back to council for the consent calendar.
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
We have a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Hagley?
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrod?
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes. Public hearings, we do not have any this evening. We do not have any old business this evening either, which is good. New business, adoption. I can't read this with these. Adoption of reference part 11 Green Building Standards Code. I will waive the reading of the rest of this. David Willoughby, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Mitchell. And hello, City Council members. My name is David Willoughby. I'm the building official for the city. And I'm here to present for the item on updates to the local amendments for the 2022 California Building Standards Code, which is what we currently have, the codes that are in effect now. How's that? All right, thank you. Next slide, please. The recommended action tonight is to waive the full reading of the text and introduce by title only an ordinance amending Chapter 15.04 of the Healdsburg Municipal Code and adopting by reference Part 11, California Green Building Standards Code of the 2022 California Building Standards Code, Title 24, and making local amendments to the 2022 California Building Code, the 2022 California Residential Code, the 2022 Green Building Code, and the 2021 International Property Maintenance Code. Next slide, please. So typically, we locally adopt by reference the adopted state codes, building codes every 3 years, and any local amendments that we have as well. So this year, June 30th, the governor signed into law Assembly Bill 130, which changed that process a little bit. This mandates that the new 2025 California Building Standards Code, which has been adopted and goes into effect for the state January 1st of 2026. That code typically would be in effect for 3 years. AB 130 extends that to 6 years. So another effect of that is that it limits local amendments affecting residential projects to those filed with the California Building Standards Commission and in effect by September 30th of 2025, so coming up shortly. There were a few items, next slide, please. There are a few items in the current local amendments that I wanted to correct and update since it's going to be in effect for the next 6 years. So that's the purpose of this ordinance. Next slide, please. I think there's about 6 proposed changes. One of them is that the California Green Building Standards Code, we're going to locally adopt that by reference. And previously, it was not adopted by reference. And even though it still applied, state adopted it, it still applied. So this time we're going to adopt that by reference, and that's going to correct that omission. Under the California Green Building Standards Code, in our current code, the Healdsburg REACH code was adopted as well, and it was placed under the Green Building Code in the Building Code section. Many jurisdictions in 2021, 2022 adopted REACH codes, which basically require electrification for appliances, for homes, for residences, rather than gas. And so the California Restaurant Association sued the city of Berkeley for their REACH code, and it went to the Ninth Circuit, and they ruled in favor of the Restaurant Association. So because of that, it basically made our reach code unenforceable. So this local amendment is going to remove the reference to the Healdsburg reach code in our building ordinance. I think the state is they're tending towards electrification anyway. So as we move forward, the state is going to be increasingly requiring electrification. That's the direction it's headed right now. Next slide, please. Another change is that the definition for newly constructed buildings in the Green Building Standards Code will be included, and this will make it consistent with the adopted definition in the building code. Another change will be an update to the fees for an appeals hearing. Currently, they are at $250 for an appeals hearing. This has not been changed for many, many years, and the new fee will just be consistent with the current fee schedule. So this occurs both in the building code and the residential code. Next slide, please. There's some old code sections found in the Swimming Pool Safety Act section under our municipal code, and this change will align the actual current code sections. And then the 2021 International Property Maintenance Code. Currently, we have adopted about 3 or 4 sections of it. With this code amendment, the entire code will apply, and there is a change in the definition for, I'm sorry. It will align the definition in the building code. Well, there's a small change. So the section that is getting changed, locally adopted, is 107, which just deals with the Board of Appeals process. And so that is just going to align with the California Building Code that we currently have. Next slide, please. So the recommended action is to waive the full reading of the text and introduce by title only an ordinance amending chapter 15.04 of the Healdsburg Municipal Code and adopting by reference part 11 of the California Green Building Standards Code of the 2022 California Building Standards Code Title 24, and making local amendments to the 2022 California Building Code, the 2022 California Residential Code, the 2022 Green Building Code, and the 2021 International Property Maintenance Code. Does anybody have any questions?
Ron?
Yeah, on the appeal fee, what could you explain a little bit more what would be appealed, what that fee applies to?
Sure. So if there's a decision from the building department, if I make a decision about something and someone does not agree with that, then they can appeal that decision, and it would go, currently the appeals board is the planning commission, so it would go to the planning commission. And so that's what the fee is for, is to pay for my time and the time of the planning commission and the whole process.
And when was the last time that fee was adjusted?
You know, I don't know. It has never been adjusted since I've been here, and that's 8 years.
I think I like to update these a little more, because that $369, that's a big jump all at one time for somebody who might not be prepared for that jump. So if we can update those a little quicker than 8 years.
I agree.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
questions? No? No? So we'll open this up to public comment. Anybody like to speak on this topic? Welcome.
You're welcome. It would just
The changes
change the
from-
items that I kind of went over. It's local amendments. Some of it is just updating code sections. There's a fee change and then just kind of correcting things mostly is what it's about.
Okay, Mayor, sorry, it should go through the mayor. I appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
My question is I watched the Mill District get built, North Village, Montage, Saggio. We have a new one that's going to be built maybe by the depot. And I'm just curious if we open ourselves up to, if we're changing anything, because obviously the REACH code got challenged in court and we do have a developer that's interested in building a senior development over by the depot. So I guess my question is, does it change anything for this new building? I mean, is it going to change in the future, anything, or are we just dealing with cleaning up things and charging more money?
Well, currently,
Sorry, David, I'm going to stop you, and after public comment, we'll run the questions through the mayor and council. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, is there anyone else who has public comment on this? Not seeing anyone, so we'll bring it back. Yeah, and so the question is, will it change anything? I guess that's a good question. It was kind of one of mine too.
sure. So as far as the REACH code goes, it doesn't change anything because it's not in effect currently. So it's just cleaning up the language, which I think is a little confusing because it is currently in the municipal code, even though it does not apply.
So it's going to remove that to be consistent with the state of California's building codes, right? And as well as the fee, isn't that set by the state as well?
For
Or
the
do we-
appeals hearing?
Yeah,
No, that's a
Okay.
local thing.
that's local.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, so the REACH code issue, I believe the actual ordinance was rescinded. And so it does not apply, even though it's currently in the building chapter for the municipal code. So it's going to be removing that, which will just clean it up. It's not going to change what applies or what doesn't apply.
Understood. Okay, thank you. And Councilmember Edwards, did you have a question?
Is there, I know that, have we added any of the WUI interfaces in this to affect the cost of construction?
No, that is under AB 130, that is an allowed change that could be made to the local amendments, but this ordinance does not do that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Down here, questions? Councilmember Kelly? No? Councilmember Egley?
I move that we waive the full reading of the text and introduced by title only ordinance amending chapter 1504 of the Healdsburg Municipal Code and adopting by reference part 11 California Green Building Standards Code CGBSC of the 2022 California Building Standards Code Title 24 and the 2021 International Property Maintenance Code in its entirety and making local amendments to the 2022 California Building Code, the 2022 California Residential Code, 2022 Green Building Code, and the 2021 International Property Maintenance Code.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Higley?
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrod?
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you very much.
And next up, then we have pay.
Madam Mayor, if I may go back,
Yes,
I'd like to amend Councilmember Higley's motion to also set a public hearing on adoption of this ordinance for August 18th.
I move to set a public hearing on adoption of the ordinance for August 18th, 2025 and publish notice of the public hearing in accordance with government's code sections 50022.3 and 6066.
Second.
Roll call vote on that one?
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Higley?
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrod?
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes. Thank you. Now moving on. pavement preservation presentation is not easy to say. Director Zimmer.
You can say PMP.
Okay, PMP.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm not sure about council, but staff has been so excited for this evening. I'm hoping that they weren't being sarcastic when they said that. The presentation today, it is informative only. Council did set a goal to investigate options for additional pavement funding. This presentation is not addressing that, but it will form a basis for those further discussions and understanding how we manage our overall pavement asset. Next slide, please. We'll start with a little bit of basics just to make sure everyone is understanding what is all going on. Your standard pavement section or structural section consists of 1 or 2 layers of asphalt. Underneath that is aggregate base, which is engineered soil, which compacts really well. And then below that is considered the original ground subgrade. And these things, how they all work together, creates the strength depending on the type of road, different thicknesses, different applications. So there's many different variations within that. The stormwater should flow off of the road, sheet flow off of the road to the curb, and then typically into a drainage inlet. When a road has problems, ruts, cracks, and such, the water doesn't sheet flow off. It goes into the pavement. You start losing fines from the asphalt, eventually from the base rock underneath. That's what causes bigger cracks as the cars pound that water within the crack, eventually leads to soft spots underneath. You see a pothole, and then things start getting bad from there. Next slide, please. The life of a pavement depends on many factors, like we were talking about with the structural section, the loading, how many trucks are on it, and the materials. But nearly all roads will follow a life cycle typical to this, in which roughly 75% of its life is pretty good condition. And then 12% of its life, it drops really fast. And then you end up with a road that, you know, is not good. Everyone knows it's not good, but it's not really degrading at that same rate anymore. Next slide, please. The good news is you can extend the life of asphalt by doing some kind of preventative maintenance. And so what this graphic is showing is, you know, at that, before the big drop in the quality of the pavement, if you do a seal coat, if you do some of this preventative maintenance, you're basically going back up to 100. It doesn't give you the same life that you originally would, but it prolongs that life. And also note on the slide the costs, because the cost increases pretty drastically as the condition of the pavement deteriorates. Next slide, please. So this can be done repeatedly, but not indefinitely. March Avenue is a good example of that. There have been multiple overlays or seal coats on top of that, and it's actually those layers on March Avenue that has failed, resulting in those more shallow potholes. So there is a limit. Have to do it right up to a certain point, and then you're ultimately going to spend more money. But again, the name of the game is extending the life of that asphalt. Next slide, please. So this is what we have. We're roughly 50% residential. The other 50% is arterials and collectors. We have 48 lane miles, or center line miles, not lane miles, of road in Healdsburg. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of numbers here, but really the only one to look at is the big number in the bottom, 146 million. That is the value of our pavement asset. That is not deferred maintenance. We'll talk about that. This is if you were to build all of our roads, that's how much it would cost. So just trying to put it in perspective of what the value of this asset is compared to, say, our buildings. Next slide, please. And because it's such a high value, that's where the pavement management program comes into play. We don't want to mess around when we're dealing with this large sum of money and do things wrong. And so a pavement management program is a software package. It does two things. It's a database, and then it does some analysis. And we'll get into a little more detail on that. Next slide, please. So our software is called Street Saver. It was selected by MTC, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. They kind of lead this whole process, and they do this so that everyone within the 9-county Bay Area is using the same software. We're looking at the roads in the same way, and that way we know when we're comparing the PCI of this street in one community to a PCI of another street in a different community, that it's a pretty fair comparison. Otherwise, you could imagine some cities saying, well, we're going to look at it a little bit differently, and their PCI will increase or decrease accordingly to what they want. So that's part of the reason why MTC does this. And they recognize that there's a cost to the process. So they have created a grant program called the PTAP grant, in which we get money every 2 years to do these inspections. They further standardize everything by having certified inspectors that come out and do it for us. They typically assign the firm, but we can have some say in whether we want this one or that one. I think that's probably enough. Next slide. So here's let's go through several slides. I didn't realize this was active. Thank you, that's probably good. So on the left, the boxes there are basically the data input, the database portion of the software. The big circle represents the areas where there's calculations, the computer is figuring out different options. You can put in how much money you have, what PCI you're trying to get to. What if we had a bunch of money dropped on us? What would we do? And that's what this program is really meant to do, is to help staff make decisions on what is the best way to spend the money that we have. And we'll go into some detail on most of this as we walk through the rest of the slides. Next slide, please. So people like to have a name to go with a number. You know, if you have a PCI of 69 like the city does versus 70, is there really a difference? No, it doesn't go from good to very good, but it feels better, doesn't it? So the numbers sometimes switch around. They often, MTC often uses a 3-year average just because of how some of the numbers come in. And as a comparison, in 2023, we were at a 3-year average of 67 here in Healdsburg. At the time, the county average was 58, Petaluma was 48, and Windsor was 73. Don't you hate Windsor? But it just kind of gives you a perspective of where we're sitting. Next slide, please. So how the PCI is calculated, again, it is consultant firms trained and certified by MTC come into the city. They look at these 8 different distress types. How severe is it? They take measurements. All of that information goes into the Street Saver software. We do our arterials and collectors every 2 years, and the residentials have to be done every 4 years. Typically, we get enough money from MTC that we can do them all every 2 years, but this is the requirement. If you don't meet the requirement, you can become ineligible for certain grant funding. So it's important that we keep up with that. Next slide, please. Just a few examples. Sawmill at a 98. Next. Center Street, you can start seeing a little bit of cracking, but everything is really smooth, solid. Think again about the water sheet flowing off of this. You don't have any problems. You're at an 80. Next slide, please. You're starting to see a little bit more. This one looks like it had some kind of an overlay at some point where the cracks have been filled, but they're showing through. Next slide, please. Here on Fitch, you can see some bigger cracks. You see the failures around where there's the paving around manholes. And particularly it's like some of the longitudinal cracks ultimately will score it lower. Next slide, please. And then Adeline, and even worse, Palm, a couple blocks away, are failed streets, clearly not doing what they should be doing anymore. Next slide, please. So when I say we have a PCI of 69, obviously that's an average of all of our streets. Here's a graphic to give you a feel for where each, what category most of our streets fall into. Again, these numbers aren't percentages. They're based on that 48 centerline miles. So of our 48 centerline miles, roughly 30 are excellent or very or good, and pretty close to 40 are good or above. So it's a pretty small percentage really of our streets that are poor or very poor condition. I'll point out this is a problem that happens in every agency. It is, people will think that if we just replace our poorest streets, you turn that 16 into 100, that's the way to go. The problem with doing that is those good streets are now degrading. If you think about that curve where we talked about, they go into that steep part of the curve. So it really is financially smarter to spend money on streets that are in good condition. That's not necessarily fair when you live on a street that's a 16, so there has to be a balance. You know, we try to strike that balance with doing enough of certain projects like March Avenue, which the community has been really clamoring for, as opposed to continuing to do more of the seal coats, which we did a few years back now. Next slide, please. So this is more of an example, but wanted to explain that within Street Saver, there's a decision tree. Because how does it spit out the dollar values that we're going to soon talk about? And I wanted to explain that that comes from staff and from our consultant who are again, trained in this. And it's very specific because the types of treatments and the cost of those treatments are different for Healdsburg than they may be for San Jose versus Bakersfield. And so it isn't just a generic one fits all. We look at those numbers and we compare them against current local bids. And so we're putting in reasonable prices. Again, this is a budgeting tool, not an engineering tool. I may say that again, it doesn't spit out things and we go, oh, that's good. We're going to build this in this way. But it helps to plan our budget in the appropriate way. Next slide, please. So again, the same chart and what I was talking about of trying to fix a road before you get to that steeper section. It's really all about preventative maintenance. It is cheaper to do, extends the life of your pavement. Next slide, please. So previously, when we talked about the value of our pavement asset at 146 million or so, what this is showing you on that top line, the 14 million, that is our deferred maintenance. That is what it would cost to repair enough roads to get us to a PCI of 80. Why a PCI of 80? 80-ish, the lower 80s is kind of like the optimal place. If you think about trying to keep every road at 100 PCI, you'd be out there constantly because it's going to degrade from 100 quickly. But if your whole system is in that upper 80s, basically you have no deferred maintenance. You can just keep going at a preventative maintenance and the occasional reconstruction, rehabilitation, and it is the most effective way to spend the city's money. So what this is showing, again, is you spend that 14 million in the first year and your PCI goes to an 80. The following numbers underneath that are showing you still need to spend money. You don't get to a PCI of 80 and stop spending. So over the course of 5 years, you would be spending roughly 23.8 million, or on average 4.8 a year. Next slide, please. So this is the fun part. Is ready? We look at 5 different scenarios. Scenario 1, we have no money. We spend nothing on pavement for the next 5 years. 2, we try to maintain our current PCI. 3, we try to increase it by 5, which is roughly a 3 million per year. Those numbers on the end are per year for 5 years. Then the budget needs average, which is which is the get to 80 game, is roughly 4.8 million per year over 5 years. And then number 5, next slide. Number 5 came from our CIP budget document. So March Avenue, Healdsburg Avenue, those are real projects that are funded and are going to happen. Ward, Sunset, Dry Creek are all projects that are in our CIP. The consultant put those in. They're not huge pavement jobs like March Avenue is. March has a pretty big impact, the amount of pavement that is getting improved. So this is the basis for scenario 5. There are issues with it, but again, it's really to compare against the other scenarios. Next slide, please. So obviously the order here, we have the first 4, which are order of how much we want to spend and how much improvement we want to have. And then the green one is our expected budget. And that's the only one that kind of goes up and down. And you can see the March Avenue makes a jump up. So you can also imagine that if, say, in 2027, 2028, we're doing other projects similar to that, which we very well may be, we'd be looking at keeping our PCI at or slightly above 69, which we're doing okay. Next slide, please. This one is kind of the opposite of that. It is looking rather at the deferred maintenance rather than your PCI score. So again, the yellow one is getting to 80, which is a deferred maintenance of 0. And what's interesting here is maintaining a PCI of 69, your deferred maintenance actually increases, which can happen and probably will happen because so much of your other payment is aging at the same time. Again, it's a computer software. It's not perfect, but it kind of gives you a feel for things that you need to be looking for and maybe some things that aren't as logical as one would think. Next slide. So a lot of information in there. I'm happy to go over any of it. I will also talk a little bit, I know we weren't talking about trying to come up with money, but some of the obvious questions is what money do we have? Our gas tax money is not a lot. It's roughly $300K per year, and all of that goes into maintenance. It pays staff to be out there to fill potholes, replace signs, that type of thing. Almost none of that goes into projects. I think pretty much none of that goes into projects. We also get the RMRA, the Road Maintenance Rehabilitation Account money. This is out of Senate Bill 1, which was 2017, I believe. And we accumulate money at around $250,000 a year. We've done one project, which was a seal coat, slurry seal job a few years back, but since then we've been saving the money up for March Avenue, which is moving forward, and that fund is paying for most of March Avenue, but that money will continue to accumulate following that project. There's a lot of talk right now about changing how, rather than gas tax, a user tax, a vehicle mile tax. Nothing's concrete. Who knows how long any of that will come about, but everyone is aware that this is a problem and gas tax isn't bringing in the revenue that we need to maintain our streets. So with that, I will now open it up to questions.
Thank you. And that was interesting.
Good.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Do we have questions? Councilmember Edwards?
The software, so that spits out a list in ranking from top to bottom, and then if we have money, you can put that dollar amount in and it will recommend which of those projects.
Not exactly. Typically you put in the money and then it spits out recommendations. And the reason why is because your priorities are going to change depending on how much money you have. And so it fits the recommendations to your budget. And then again, those recommendations need to go through engineering because we can't just do them. There's real basic questions such as, are the utilities underground okay? Can we get these utilities replaced before we do the pavement? Is the recommendation for this road actually correct? Do we have bigger issues here? Are there drainage issues that need to be dealt with? So there's a whole bunch of questions. And if you have a big chunk of money, sometimes you don't want everything in one area because that's really hard on the residents, or maybe you do want everything in one area depending on what the work is, so the contractor's not driving back and forth. So there's a lot of factors there, but yes, that's how the software works. It will spit out a list of potential projects.
And then I'm gathering the newer the construction of the street, the different materials are used that instead of 100 years ago, or the age, it's similar depending on age. In other words, our older sections like Johnson wearing quicker than, say, Hillsburg Avenue or some of those?
Materials have not changed all that much, particularly for your standard city street with curb and gutter. Things are different on freeways and areas where you don't necessarily have that curb and gutter. There's different methods. There are new additives, the rubberized asphalt and things, and some of them definitely add life. They also add cost.
All right, thank you.
Let me ask about the deferred maintenance number, the 14 million, basically. Can you explain, is that just, if we spent that money, what would that do to the roads? Would that bring them all up to the 80? Is that?
It doesn't bring every road up to 80. It would bring our average up to 80. And so on that slide, it doesn't show the list of projects, but it would be a very big list of projects. You would have a long list of roads that would get some kind of like seal coat. You would have a shorter list of some overlays or small grind and paves, and you probably have a couple of reconstructions similar to what we're doing on March. And if you did all of that in a year, again, with all those factors, which would be very hard to do, then you'd be at a PCI at 80 when you were done.
And after that, you'd have to keep spending.
Then you keep going, but again, you're going at kind of the optimal level.
Right.
If you, as I pointed out on that last slide, even if you can try to maintain your PCI, your deferred maintenance can still increase depending on the situation.
Is there any part of the calculation that includes the busyness of the street, how much traffic it gets? Does that factor in as well?
Yes. At this level in the software, it's really about arterial versus collector versus residential.
Right.
And so it does calculate a different cost for those reconstructions, knowing that it's typically a thicker section. But again, when you get to the actual, this is the road we're going to do, then there's borings and you figure it out. There's calculations based on the amount of trucks that are on it.
Great. Okay, thank you. If there are no more questions from council, we'll open this up to public comment. Anybody want to talk roads today besides width? Okay, not seeing anyone come forward.
Mayor, if given no public comment, if I could just offer one wrap-up comment. The city council has a goal this fiscal year to look at funding sources for road maintenance. This is not that discussion, obviously. But I did just want to call that out to let you know we're thinking about that, and that I think and I hope that you all find this a really useful baseline. Obviously, we can't solve a problem or work on a problem until we understand the problem. And this is something that we do every couple of years. So some of you have seen it before, but I know I always find it helpful just to get those order of magnitude numbers. We're not here to set a policy goal yet. You saw different scenarios, but I think we all agree we'd like to see that number go up. And so now we have a fresh feel for what it would take to maintain the number, which is better than going down, and some different scenarios for what those kinds of improvements might be. We don't sit here with any, magic bullet as to how we're going to solve that issue, but I think just the order of magnitude and the scale is important. So I just kind of wanted to flag that as you look at all of this information. We're probably thinking about the same things that the council is, which is, well, what would it look like to get another X million dollars into the system and try and do so on a recurring basis so we can put a dent in that number, start moving up. So I just wanted to let you know that we're thinking about that, and we'll be preparing something for you. My hope is within the next few months back for a conversation of, okay, what do some different funding options look like? What might they bring in? And just see if we can get some direction on how we might pursue some of those. So that is coming up somewhat soon.
Great, thank you. And I think just when you talked about the streets as an asset of the city, I thought that was an interesting, I hadn't thought of it that way, and it is, of course. So like anything else that we own and have to maintain. So kind of gave a different perspective for me. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to move on to local preference policy for affordable housing. Housing Director Steven Sotomayor.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. Steven Sotomayor, Housing Director for the City of Healdsburg. Tonight, I'll be presenting an update on policy options related to Healdsburg's local preference policy for affordable housing. This presentation aligns with our strategic initiative 3, which is expand affordable housing opportunities, with a specific goal around looking at ways that we can expand upon our local preference policy. Next slide. So today I'm asking the council to receive a presentation on the city's local preference policy and to provide direction to staff regarding enhancements and whether to adopt the policy by ordinance pursuant to Senate Bill 649, which I'll explain a little bit more as we go through. If I could jump to the next slide. So our local preference policy was adopted by resolution in December of 2019. It prioritizes applicants for affordable housing based on geographic connection. And that policy includes 4 tiers that identify qualified buyers in a first priority who live or work in the city limits of Healdsburg, and a second priority for buyers or renters who live and work in unincorporated Healdsburg, but within the 95448 zip code. And the third priority is for qualified buyers or renters who live and work in Windsor, Geyserville, Cloverdale, including those cities' unincorporated boundaries within certain zip codes that cover those areas. And the fourth priority, or the welcome back priority, is individuals who previously lived in Healdsburg within city limits, as evidenced by prior enrollment in Healdsburg public or private schools or a previously active utility account. This policy has been successful so far to date. And council has identified as part of their goals to ask if we can expand upon this. And today I'll walk through that. Next slide, please. So to talk about a little bit about the success, our local preference policy to date has been applied to several projects that have come across this council. The Randall Apartments, as part of the Mill District, was leased up under the local preference policy, which resulted in about 85% of the units leased to Healdsburg residents. That was in partnership with local nonprofits. The Healdsburg scattered sites, which did contain in the very beginning, as we remodeled them, Healdsburg residents did retain those residents and then marketed to those that lived here. And we saw success about 88% of those units in the initial lease up. Some of those units had individuals that were over income, so they were marketed out, but that shows a relatively good success in that. And then finally, a smaller one, but an inclusionary duplex that was part of the farm stand has been consistently leased to local residents that work in Healdsburg. And so we've been successful at this, and I think that there's several things. And before we get into whether we need an ordinance or a resolution, I think what's been really working well with our local preference policy is early community-based marketing. So one of the things that we do, especially in our affordable housing agreements, but also our disposition and development agreements that we have, is that we incorporate the resolution language into those documents. And as housing works with those developers, we come up with a marketing plan. We generally require developers to give us that marketing plan. It used to be 60 days. We moved it to 90 days after we leased up the Randall because we realized we need a little more time for process. But we work with them and how they're going to do that. We generally ask them to reach out to community partners, which is another reason why being successful, if you noticed, our strategic partnerships are on there, but they help to do application workshops. We have housing navigators, people that can assist through that in both English and Spanish or other languages as necessary. And that has shown that when there are available units within our community that are marketed to our community, I think what we see is that people are very hungry for those. And I can attest to that by the phone calls that I get of people asking, do you have available units? How do I get on a unit list and all those things, which we don't necessarily manage here at the city, but we work with our development partners. And this is one of those policies that we have in place to ensure that locals get first access to these units through the marketing strategy. And then finally, the application assistance. One of the harder things that we find for people is understanding what qualifies them for affordable housing. The housing department has held resource fairs. We often invite legal aid. We have workshops. We encourage developers to do those workshops as well because it can be intimidating. Sometimes people don't understand that assets that they have in the bank, as long as they're not drawing income, don't count towards your income, and they'll disqualify themselves before looking into it. So those types of programs definitely have assisted our local preference resolution to be successful as we've applied it through these different projects. And notably, with the coming of 155 Dry Creek and Saggio Hills, we're going to see that in action, as well as the North Village and 3 Healdsburg Avenue, all who will fall under this local preference for the deed restricted units within that project. Next slide. So the Senate Bill 649 became effective in 2023. And what this did is it allowed cities to adopt local, it did a lot more than this, but for the specific of this conversation, it allowed cities to adopt local preference ordinances for affordable housing. And there's some limitations to what you can do with that, and I'll go through those. But it gave a formal process to do this, which requires the California Department of Housing and Community Development to review. And it also requires cities to do other things such as put it on their website, to publish it, have a public process, and to report on it in their annual housing element progress report. So this would be something that we would need to incorporate into our housing element if it was adopted under an ordinance, and it would need to be reviewed. So what does HCD look for? They want, as soon as this is published, they want the ordinance and findings within 30 days. Obviously, they would like to see a public process. We called the department and asked them what we would need to do, and they gave us guidance, and they showed us other cities that had done this with examples. So it's not an unknown process. There's 3 cities that have adopted local preference ordinances under here now, and they're underway. We have to report it, as I mentioned, and then there's a cap to the preference set-asides at 25 to 30% of units. They generally don't want to see all your units like that, but the cap would apply to those units reserved under the ordinance and wouldn't necessarily infringe upon our ability to market like we previously did under the resolution. So those are the protected units under the ordinance. It's recommended to be within 25 to 35%. And then finally, clear objective criteria. And one thing you'll find in Berkeley, San Jose, and National City is that these cities looked for very specific reasons to have this. For example, we can take a look at San Jose, or Berkeley looked at displacement from the BART expansion as a category to give local preference, but a lot of it has to do with displacement. And, you know, displacement could be easily a local that is out of affordable housing, a local that is out of housing that wishes to remain, and we could look at it from that standpoint. So there are specific criteria, but other cities have been through it, and I think that it matches quite a bit. Now, the piece that's in there that I didn't mention just yet is to complete a disparate impact study. So what that is is a study that shows that the population you're serving matches the general population. You have to kind of show your work and say, why are we doing this local preference? Are we going to be discriminating? And that is one of the things that does bring a cost with it, which I can explain a little bit more in the next slide. So if we did want to move forward with adopting our local preference policy under an ordinance, there's several reasons why you might want to do this. One is it creates more transparency and it creates a process that developers can follow. Two, the second thing is that this was designed to allow us to apply local preference to low-income housing tax credit projects, which are the bonds and the general funding that we get. For example, Saggio Hills Phase 2 will be under the low-income housing tax credit. And generally, when you have a HUD-funded or a state-funded program, local preference isn't going to apply unless you're complying with these different criteria or have that adopted ordinance under 686. That kind of falls out of the range of what we're doing with marketing, but this would give us a little bit more teeth in applying it to those types of projects. So this would take, we would have to do the study, which would take 2 to 3 months, stakeholder outreach to be able to develop criteria and to meet with developers. Then we would draft the ordinance as our regular process goes and have public hearings and then adoption and implementation, which means publishing on the website, making sure the right materials are there. So it's about a year-long process if we were to start it. Maybe it could go a little bit faster. Another mitigating factor is how long it takes HCD to review it. But it definitely is a process if we were to take this on. Next slide, please. So one of the things as we looked at this was in whether or not looking if an ordinance or a resolution would make sense is we looked at the program in general. And one of the things that staff recognized in our local preference policy as we implement it today is that there is a few things that we could do to enhance the existing policy as it stands. One of those is that staff does affordable housing monitoring on our projects. Specifically, we focus in on projects that have city money and may not have other programs that are monitoring them. For example, the Citrine Apartments would be a good example of an inclusionary that didn't take state or federal funds. Therefore, the city is the primary one making sure that they are following the rules of their affordable housing agreement. Whereas in like a state tax credit program, they'll look at the same stuff as us, and therefore there'll be a couple of agencies monitoring them. But we thought that one of the things that we could do is to track applicant origin and also when people leave, where do they go to get better data sets? But more importantly is to look at that the local preference policy that was included in that agreement is still being put into effect as they're leasing beyond the initial lease up, and to add that as a monitoring point so that we are tracking that closer. Standardizing an outreach toolkit would be a good approach to make sure that when we're doing this, that one developer is not doing it another. That would take some coordination among them, as many developers have their own process, their own comfort levels. That is kind of an argument around the ordinance, is that once you adopt it in that sense, it's state recognized, and therefore you have a little more leverage to say, I'd like it this way. Versus working on an individual basis. We've been doing pretty well with that because the volume of projects coming in that need to adhere to this aren't overwhelming. So we are able to work with the developers, but that does give us more of the ability to standardize. And finally, expanded tenant support. Just continue to make those partnerships, because I'll tell you, I think the best is to get the local word out that something's coming and have people apply, and they will apply. There's no shortage of that. And I think that's still probably in this overall mix, probably one of the most effective things that we can do through our community organizations. But these are items that we put forward to give you an idea of some enhancements that we can make with the existing resolution as well as the ordinance if we were to move forward. Next slide. So there are options here. And so I did want to mention, as I wrote the report, I didn't have this information, but originally the cost was something that I put in the staff report as something that the city might have to take on. But I was talking with Freebird Development and their president, Robin Zimbler, who is working currently on the local preference for Saggio Hills that's in there and working through that, as well as for the next phase. She had to consult with the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And she informed me that a part of her implementing that local preference in our disposition and development agreement, she would be required to go to HUD and ask if that would be allowable, which would also require the same level of study that we would need to do to satisfy the state's requirements for us to adopt an ordinance. So there's a synergy there. So what was a cost that maybe the city might have had to take on for that desperate impact study actually could probably be, there's some synergy with what Freebird Development Company, and I've talked to Robin and Robin Zimbler, and she agreed that she would be happy to fund that study because she has to do it anyway. And the second part would be that Saggio Hills Phase 2 is a low-income housing tax credit project, which would also help to implement that policy for her in renting up those units so that she can comply with what we're asking for. So that is actually something that popped up that would actually reduce the cost, and it may make this a little more of something that would be worth pursuing. So those are two of the options that we have. We could either keep the existing policy and add to it with some of those enhancements, or we can move forward with an ordinance which would provide us more clarity around low-income housing tax credit projects, wouldn't infringe upon our existing marketing strategies, and also would give us a reporting and transparency. So I wanted to bring this forward to the council today to get direction on where the council would like to go with this. And so with that, next slide. I take it back to the question and conclude the presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you very much for that presentation. Do we have questions? I'm sure we do. Chris, go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Thank you. At one point you mentioned there's a 25 to 35% cap. And so is that, do I understand that that means that's how many units we could actually, firmly require to be leased to local people? Is that right?
Within the parameters of the ordinance that HCD would review, they recommend 30% cap, or no more than like 1/3 of all your units. So that would be under that ordinance. But the way that we would market, and I'll look at our attorney as well, but the way that we would market, we could also get word out early. And I think we could still enjoy the success that we had just with the resolution, but that would be specific to the ordinance. So we would make a finding around displacement or what our study indicates would be the priority, and those units would be specific to that.
So second part.
So it wouldn't hinder from the rest of the units being local. We wouldn't have to say, okay, those can, right?
So, I mean, I guess the hope would be 80 to 85%, and in the examples you gave, it's pretty good, but we'd still have an opportunity to strengthen the policy, the ordinance, and improve on even those numbers. Is that an optimistic goal for this?
I don't, I think that those numbers that we have today are pretty good, and whether or not we get higher than those, I think more it's about the ability to apply it to low-income housing tax credit projects, which would give us that ability to just unilaterally say that we can do that. And I think.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think that was very well said. And another reason to adopt the policy by ordinance is that the state legislature prescribed a way for communities to adopt local preference policies in SB 649. It is by ordinance. So regardless of whether it increases the success of the city's current local preference policy, if the state tells you how to do something, it's always a good idea to give that some good consideration.
Sure, thank you.
Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. And I just wanted to ask a follow-up. Appreciate Vice Mayor Herod for asking the question about the unit cap. As of now, for the LAHTC projects that have been funded and constructed or in progress, we are applying the local preference policy as it stands, and with like hopes and dreams that we get, a huge percentage of units and marketing it so that people apply, but we don't have any specific set aside or mandate. So if for some reason no one locally was looking for a unit, which we know is not the case, then potentially the numbers could be much lower. So if we were to adopt an ordinance, then it actually helps us kind of almost create a local set aside number that, so it has the ability to kind of strengthen what we have now, and on top of it have the extra marketing reach.
Sure. So I think you said that exactly. So I think that, this local preference ordinance kind of reverse, it would be our foundation to begin with if we started with that. And then our marketing strategy would be the cherry on top that pushes us up. I think that they both work together well. And I think that one of the opportunities within, the ordinance is that we can look specifically at what we're trying to address. For example, I said, BART displacement could be one. In Berkeley, in San Jose, they looked at council districts and preference like that. Now, we may not have that same issue, but we could look at displacement from affordable housing, or we could look at displacement based on income. One thing that's important to note that I didn't mention in the presentation, this only applies to deed restricted affordable units. It would not apply to any market rate units that were part of the project.
And just my last question. So one of the objective eligibility standards that I saw in one of the other city models, I think, was around displacement from a variety of different sources, as you mentioned, and then also substandard housing. And so I know we've had this issue in Healdsburg quite a bit, where some of our existing affordable by age of older units that maybe, we've heard kind of horror stories about issues, mold, infestation, appliances that don't work, apartments in town that don't have running water for weeks on time, and landlords who don't respond, and people afraid to say, hey, we have a problem here, because they don't want to lose their housing because there's nowhere for them to go. And so I'm wondering how do you define substandard housing in terms of how we could have objective eligibility? And is that something, I know your office often works with folks in the community who come forward saying, I don't know how to navigate this issue. Is that something that you think is possible? Obviously, the vast majority of landlords in our community are doing a great job maintaining their units, but I've seen firsthand a number of really terrible living situations that people right here in our community are experiencing. And so I'm just wondering if that's something that we could somehow add that objectivity standard around the substandard housing.
I think that's a great point. And one of the challenges is that we try to keep people in that unit and get the repairs. But if they don't, the challenge is there's not always a unit. And I think that would be a great area to take a look at. I don't have the exact answer if we can specifically name that, but I definitely think that falls within displacement. And that would be a big priority based upon what needs I've seen as well.
I wonder if that's something that you could, as we have those conversations with landlords, I know when the building official talks to folks like, hey, this is against code and you need to upgrade this, they're saying to tenants, well, we need people to move out of here so we actually can do this, and no one's moving because there's nowhere to go. So it could be a partnership with those landlords to give them the opportunity to move folks out into new units, and then they have the opportunity to then have an empty unit that they can do those repairs on.
Thank you.
Councilmember Edwards.
Yeah, when you were looking at Freebird covering the cost, Freebird would be working with HCD, or would they set their own scope and then HCD would just review it?
So for theirs, they'd be working directly with HCD. So the scope, I would try to work with the developer to make sure it covers our needs as well as theirs. And I think she's committed to that because it's going to cover her project as well. It's relatively the same study. I looked through it. If we were to look at something in addition that maybe wasn't covered in her scope, for example, displacement due to substandard housing conditions, and we needed to further delve into that, that would be something that I would ask her to take a look at as well. But I believe her study will work with HUD, and that the same information from that study should satisfy the requirements of what the state Housing and Community Development Department wants.
And then in this, do we currently, I don't know if we currently do, keep an ongoing list server for people who are interested in this, that it would maintain them so that whenever a project came open, that there is a mass mail that goes out, or is it just general marketing, how they normally would market and make an announcement?
So we generally put the marketing on the developer through their marketing plan, so the way that they would put it out, but we definitely play into how that's going to happen and what community organizations it goes out. And of course, we always try to use every city resource, our Facebook, our email list, when something does come available. But after that point, when it becomes available, there is then it's a private development and they have their own leasing processes. So they're following our policy, and this is where a local preference and a reserve maybe fits in well as well.
It would be nice if we had a master list so that that is consistent across all developers. It's not like we have a lot of different developers, but I'm just saying the process would be nice if we had a centralized way, the template that they would follow.
Yeah, yes. And I think for a while we've discussed that each developer has their own application, and sometimes, they don't want to mix it up. But in this conversation, one of the groups that I want to speak to, of course, are the affordable housing developers. And one of the things that we could definitely take a look at is standardization is one of the enhancements that we suggested is for marketing, is for application process. And maybe we even convince them to use the same waiting list. But Burbank has a long-standing waiting list that people have waited on forever. And the challenge is sometimes if you try to merge those all together, that it becomes kind of like where were you in the priority of that? So I definitely, I see where you're coming from with that and understand. And I think that's a conversation as we go with the developers to see if they'll work on maybe pulling from a common list. If we did have specific criteria and we knew who was being displaced, that could be something else. Well, if somebody was displaced and our ordinance covered substandard, then we could be like, here's this applicant that's ready to go.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Hagley?
Yeah, I have more comments than anything, but to me, I mean, here in Healdsburg, we do a lot of cool things, but this is why we're here, and this matters. This is a big deal, and when you've been around long enough, you've been here when the different iterations of the local preference to visiting your friend at the Randall, at the ribbon cutting, where you go in and you see the impact that these kind of policies have. It's not just paper, it's not glamorous, it's not any of that, but it's real. And I like the fact that we're even able to consider something with a little bit more teeth. To me, it just, it's heartwarming, I think, just because I know what we've done. We've all seen the impact. And just from your data, the state has a very low threshold of 35%, and we're at 80 and 100% on a duplex. I mean, this is a community that cares about the people that are here, and that is really reflected in that. Couple of things, not a big deal, but it's actually a welcome home, not welcome back clause. But a couple of comments that I had was on the stakeholder outreach. I think it's important to include the North Bay Association of Realtors, as well as the Healdsburg Chamber. When we're looking at the average median income at 80% for a family of four is $120,000 a year. I think we're getting into that range where you have people that are, working here and they want to put down roots, but they're not quite to the point of being able to purchase something. And I think it's important, I attend the real estate meetings and constantly you hear about, does anybody have a unit? Does anybody have an apartment? So I think that education piece is key with both the chamber, the realtors, the business owners that might not be members of the chamber, hotels, restaurants, where I think we need to keep expanding along with our current stakeholder groups, continue to expand that educational piece. And I think as part of this, on a continuing basis, there's presentations from our staff to kind of help explain to all the groups, whether it's through Core Zone or Reach for Home or what, to make sure that everybody understands, okay, we've got a new year, here's the AMI limits, here are the units, so that as an employer, I would be able to know like, oh, this category of employees could qualify for this. And then to your point right now, we have a scattered different group of developers to make sure that there's either a streamlined or they have one stop or they're educated on, all right, here's the application process and kind of understand it. I think that's the key with all of this. And I think that's the key that's helped us get some of these units up to the percentages that we've had, is because of the hand holding with the groups. And I think we just need to continue to expand that to make sure that people that are in that income category, that I would love it if 100% of those units are filled by people that qualify under our local preference. On
on the annual reporting, I appreciate I feel like that's one thing that's kind of lacked. It's always been kind of a frustration of mine that, I called one of the properties and just asked whoever's on, working there, like, hey, do you know about our local preference? No, what's that? And I think that's important, not just to have this, where this ordinance is helpful is if we have baked in language that has reporting requirements for these income restricted units, that on an annual basis, when we get an update, you have that, anonymized zip code, where they're going, where they're coming from kind of thing. I think that would be really helpful. But more than that, it also puts the on-duty property manager, that's the point person, the face-to-face that's taking applications, talking to people, make sure that they're aware of it so that when a unit is coming up, they're already starting to go through the marketing list or reaching out saying, hey, we've got a 2-bedroom coming up and it's going to be 60% AMI. And then there's, word can get out locally. And I think that's how you keep, people here, you keep the roots going deeper into town, into our community. Those are my comments. I don't really have a question on this because I feel like we've had a lot of the questions that we've addressed, and we're kind of getting to the point where it's about time that the state caught up. That's what these units are for, is to kind of rebuild our community, bring people back, and help people put down roots. So I'm absolutely in support of this and not ready to make any motion. I want to hear from the public, but I wanted to share my feedback. But I'm excited for this one. Thank you.
Thank you. I think one of the questions that I think you're addressing in your comments are, after the initial rental, it doesn't seem as though there's a good process, or maybe there is and I didn't hear it, for making sure that the next tenant is also under the local preference policy. Is that what you were suggesting in doing more oversight with our resolution?
Yes, I think that, adding it into annual monitoring is something that we check on, or at least the process, or reminding, and I think somebody mentioned property manager is a key in that, reminding that we have this in effect. And that's a matter of staff getting to these places and making sure, or increasing the communication and the feedback between these properties. We monitor about 6 to 7 properties a year as we go through. So we can definitely increase the communication around this one particular point.
And regardless if we go to an ordinance, this could still happen, right? We would have that kind of oversight and have a stronger commitment from the state as well, it sounds like.
Yes, we would continue to move those staff enhancement recommendations, unless there were any objections, staff felt like would increase the effectiveness of the existing policy.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think also it's important, I think the Sajo Hills project is going to be one that's going to really be beneficial to our community in a very different way, and maybe more significant way than some of the other projects with the lower income and the disabled portion, helping. So if we can, if they're willing to pay and we can help them by letting them pay, seems like like something we should consider seriously. And I take it you're recommending that.
I think with that synergy with Freebird, and that they're saying that this would help them implement our policy, it makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Any other questions before we go? Yeah, Vice Mayor.
Just a quick comment. I think amongst this group, the logic of building affordable and low-income housing is obvious, but for the small and dwindling number of people in our community who are unconvinced that we need more housing, when you mention that they have this policy in place now, it always makes, you always get this response of like, oh yeah, that's good. Okay, I can live with that now, because otherwise they have other concerns. But it's been really great in terms of communicating with those folks to be able to express that we've had this policy and we've had success with it. So it's going to be wonderful if we can strengthen it.
Okay, so I'll open this up to public comment. Anybody wish to speak on this topic? Welcome.
Thank you. So every week I live on 801 Port on, Hillsborough, California. You knew that. Every week I get some marketing that's Lux Places that tells me that I should be selling my house. And I just want to mention culture. I really think you're on the right path. We need to do this, and it makes complete sense. But one of the things we are up against, mentioning, what's going on in our town, is statements like this. Many of Hillsburg's best opportunities are in properties that might not shine online, but have fantastic bones or location. Let's go see them in person. I bring that up because there's plenty that this realtor is putting out. It's an ultra luxury. This is what we're up against. It's not that we don't want these people to move here and spend $3.5 million, which is the average price last month in this town to buy a house, but I just really would concur, and I appreciate former Mayor Hagley's commitment to this topic. I really want to not just see people coming in and taking up space and finding the good bones of our middle-class neighborhoods. So I really would speak in favor of anything you can do to create an understanding that this council supports not only local preference, but people that are working here. And I didn't really hear that you were actually looking at preferring people that actually are working and not driving up 101, having subbed in the public schools, and I will continue to do that at Fitch Mountain. I hear kids talk about their parents working other places, but they live here. And that's unfortunate because it'd be nice to see a work-live connection. So I think that's part of this. But again, we're up against a huge luxury housing market. And these people, as you know, they have the gas blowers that are blowing the leaves. They've got the gardeners. They've got all the people that they're not here all the time. I know I'm generalizing, but in my neighborhood now, there's 4 homes that are empty. And it's just hard to go against it. So if you can make a difference on this one and actually support getting a policy and putting some teeth to it, I really appreciate your leadership on this, former Mayor Hagley, willingness to do this. I think it's really good. I also want to commend you for your report. It's really important that we stay on top of this because the marketing, as I mentioned, is important for people in our town to know that we value more than just the people that can afford to live here, but we value the people that are here that are, as I mentioned before, holding up our economy with low paid jobs, which is what I see in this town, a lot of disparity of income. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Not seeing anyone. Stephen, could you address the isn't workers part of our policy, local preference?
Number
Yeah.
one,
Yeah.
to live or work in Healdsburg,
That's what I thought.
and then live or work in the unincorporated part of Healdsburg, live or work within the unincorporated Windsor to Cloverdale. And if at any time you lived in Healdsburg, welcome home.
Thank you. That's a good clarification, important. So, yes, please.
So I appreciate, all of this energy. I think moving towards an ordinance makes sense, especially since it's outlined in SB 649. I think the expanded tenant support, and I like the idea of, mirroring the geography of what Councilmember Hagley just outlined. What we're focusing on is, Northern Sonoma County as part of the criteria. So I think you list La Luz as one of the organizations in your list. They are specific to Sonoma Valley, which doesn't make a ton of sense given our priority for Northern Sonoma County. So I would just suggest looking at La Familia Sana, which is Cloverdale and Geyserville focused, or Nuestra Comunidad, which is Windsor or North County focused for outreach. And then I like the idea of a uniform marketing plan. I think that makes a ton of sense and will make it a lot easier for developers to not have to reinvent the wheel, that we basically give them a template of what we're hoping they do and following that. I think this is what Councilmember Edwards was saying, that maybe trying to have a uniform application. And I feel like that's come up before. And I know we've gotten pushback from different developers that they have the way that they do it, but I know it really doesn't make sense from like a user standpoint or an applicant standpoint to have to fill out so many separate applications when it's really just asking you for the same information over and over again. So I don't know if a uniform application is possible, but ideally just making it easier for folks to not have to get the runaround as they're navigating, working so many jobs, so many hours a week, limited transportation options, and then we're telling them you have to fill out a bunch of different things. Because to most folks in town, it's all the city. They don't know that these are all different developers, doing these projects. So otherwise, I'm really excited to see this come back. Thanks.
I just wanted to follow up. Very good point. I'm in banking, and every bank has their own personal financial statement on their own form letterhead, but the information is pretty universal. So I almost feel like we could have something. And the easier it is to fill this information out with drop-down menus or, on a PDF online, whatever, that maybe as a city of Healdsburg one that then can be fed to where then they can take that and say, all right, they qualify. And then at that point, because I'll use other people's personal financial statements to do the initial review. And then, all right, if we're going to do something, you need to fill out our form at that time. But that way, there's something that is kind of universal with everybody. So it's almost like that one stop that I think would really help, whether it's, any of the organizations. And then to follow up, I think it is important on an annual basis that there's just kind of a little information tour, maybe 3 or 4 stops with like different groups, whether it's the business group, Core Zone, Reach for Home, the different groups that kind of educate them on, hey, here's where we are today, and here's the process. Any questions?
Yeah, no, I think that's Councilman Hagley was right, is that there's enter a database and then the different developers could pull what they need into their forms from that. So I think in this day and age, that would really make things simpler. And when you're explaining it to them, you're explaining with one application form instead of having people come in multiple times to fill out different ones. So I think that would be great if we could work towards that.
So to get consensus from the council, are we, so we want to provide direction to staff regarding the enhancements. Do we all agree with what that recommendation from them was to do the enhancements as well? So yes, okay. And then whether to adopt the policy by ordinance pursuant to Senate Bill 649, are we all in agreement to direct them to do that as well? Yes, so, okay. There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate all you do. Thank you. Okay, and so 9D, discussion of update process for council protocols, Assistant Manager, City Manager April Mitz.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and council members. So this is a much shorter presentation and not quite as exciting as pavement management and affordable housing. So I will hopefully make this quick and painless for you. So tonight we're looking at the City Council protocol, to review and update your council protocols. Next slide. This came specifically out of the fiscal year 25-26 adopted city council goals, and one particular goal did address update the city council's governance protocols. Next slide. So here is the preliminary list. So based off of council direction at goal setting, there were actually 3 very specific protocols that council looked at adopting or updating, and those are they're noted in the reason in this chart. Furthering that, myself, our city clerk, city manager, we went through the council protocols and just kind of tried to look at what are some other things that we could address. Most of the things that were determined to be addressed was either by doing best practices and or make the protocols consistent with our current practice that we're doing. So we did break them into 3 different sections. The first is things in the protocols that just flat out need to be updated. And that again is to reflect the current practice. The area might need clarification or just to follow best practices. For instance, updating to be gender neutral. The second category that are things that are just missing from the protocols. So the first is reflecting districts. Since that is something brand new to the city of Healdsburg, that's something that we do need to address because it's not currently in there. And the second is policy on legislation and ballot measure positions that the city council takes. So that's something that's not in there. And both of those two items were specifically directed by city council. And then the third section is things in the protocols that require further examination. So again, a lot of these just reflect what our current practice is. Maybe legislation has changed over the years. The very last one is also, I just want to point it out, that was part of the city council goals, was to look at our current process for Zoom public comments. Obviously, that did not exist before the infamous 2020. And then once we went back to in-person meetings, public comments went away for Zoom. And so now a lot of councils are looking at readdressing that and seeing, okay, is it something that we want to reintroduce back into our regular protocols? So with that, the next slide, again, very brief presentation, is staff recommendation on this particular item. And I've gone through council protocol updates a couple different times before. And based on what I've seen before work, we are making a recommendation that the council do appoint a subcommittee that will work with staff to review the existing protocols. And then the subcommittee will make a recommendation to city council for consideration. I want to make a note that the subcommittee recommendation is not the final. We don't expect it to be, okay, we're making this recommendation, please just bless the recommendation. The other times that I've seen protocols updated, typically a lot of the things that are being updated in the protocols are very just routine in nature. So those ones we expect, okay, there isn't going to be any large council discussion over it. Knowing that if we bring it back to council based on a subcommittee's recommendation, there is going to be discussion and dialogue. And my experience is typically it comes back at least one more time to city council. But that gives staff a little bit more time to be able to fine tune the protocols that are being put forth to city council. Another alternative, if council does not want to appoint a subcommittee, is to hold a special meeting workshop to conduct the review, doing a quick look at what's on this list. There also might be other things on council members' minds that they might want to look at updating. Just on this list, if you look 12 items, 20 minutes on average per item, you're talking about a 4-hour special workshop meeting. So that is an alternative. The other alternative is to conduct a review in segments as standing agenda items. Definitely not something that I'd recommend because in your council protocols, it could take months and months and months to actually try to update them if you're only taking it a chunk at a time. And if you really want good discussion, hybrid, if council did want to consider, would be maybe having a subcommittee look at things that are just really standard. We just need to update it. And then maybe taking one item or two items that are really on the forefront of city council's minds, such as the Zoom meetings, and maybe addressing like one item like that during a standing agenda item on the city council, but all of the protocols could be updated using a subcommittee. So with that, I will turn it over to city council for any questions.
Thank you for that. Do we have questions? Vice Mayor?
How would you imagine the process if we went with the subcommittee? How would the council members that are not members of that subcommittee contribute ideas? I mean, what would be the procedure for that? That would be the most ethical and clear in terms of the Brown Act and so on for doing that. So say the subcommittee is in a month-long whatever review process and somebody has a great idea they want to throw into the mix. How does that work?
I might want to consult our city attorney on that.
Can you ask me that again?
Yeah, how I'll try to simplify it. It's how would the council members who are not on the subcommittee, how would they contribute new ideas to the process that's going on with the subcommittee?
You'd have to do it in a council meeting. So we'd have to figure out, I think as Assistant City Manager Metz said, this would be an iterative process. It would likely come back to the council more than once. And so you add additional ideas to the dais. And we could also have a meeting in advance so that you could tell the subcommittee your thoughts on, I think this area needs to be addressed, or I'd like to clean up this wording, or we could get your ideas in advance
Yeah,
and at
thank
the end. But there is, as you point out, the Brown Act does prohibit you from talking to the subcommittee outside of a meeting.
Okay, thank you. That's clear. And yeah, this question came up as I looked over this list, which I thought was very thoughtful and complete. I started to have some ideas start to percolate up, and it made me think, how's this going to play out, in the future once this gets rolling. Thank you.
Councilmember Higley.
Yeah, I appreciate this being on the agenda, and the last time I think we updated it, and I found it in one of my old files, was in 2017, and it was in response to, we as a council kept agendizing multiple items over and over and over. And the city manager was like, all right, you guys, we need to kind of change how we agendize items. And because the title was Agenda Items Added to Council in Addition to Regular Work Plan. And it was like a whole list. So anyway, when I'm looking at this, I don't know if a subcommittee is really necessary. I almost feel like I tend to be in agreement. Some of these seem to be like technical updates that I feel like, staff could do, or best practices that then we come back to review. Attendance via teleconferencing, I guess we collectively decide, yeah, we want to bring back Zoom comments, teleconferencing, some of this other stuff. But I feel like a lot of this, staff could do an initial draft that then we have comments on. I don't know. That's just my initial thought on this. I'm not looking to recreate this, but some of the stuff related to, districts and things like that, I think, there's other cities that have done this. Maybe pull some sample language that we can look at to respond to, is kind of like my thoughts. So I don't know. I'm open to comments, but that was kind of my impression as I looked at this.
Ron.
Yeah, I think, some of these things, I knew that when I went through that manual and was talking about letterhead, that it was time to update this. But I think some things are really critical on this, like the Zoom public comment and how we agendize things. I'd really like to have the community input on that. Those are, there are a few things that are really important to a lot of people. And I would like to have as much input on those things as possible, particularly the Zoom, because that was a opening of government, and to have our residents involved in the reopening, I think is really critical, rather than us just telling them how we're going to reopen it. So.
Thank you. Councilmember Kelly.
Yeah, as I reviewed these, I don't think I've looked at the protocols since 2020. There's definitely several components of the protocols that we're not currently following. So I think it would be helpful it's always great to look at it and revisit it. I think the items that were called out by staff in the staff report, the 12-ish items that Assistant City Manager Mitz mentioned, clearly need to be updated. Like we're not following the protocols, which means either we need to follow the protocols or change the protocols, right? And that's what staff called out in this. And then obviously the ones where there's some nuance in what we could be doing differently. I think one of the things that I read and I realized was actually the way that we ask for items to be agendized is that we tend to kind of go into the weighing of the issue and the pros and cons of like the meat of it, which we are not supposed to do. We are just supposed to say, and I think also on the staff side, when we do agree to agendize something and we put it on, we're not supposed, it says in our protocols, there's not supposed to be a staff report, there's not supposed to be work done. So I think we need to either change the policy or change how we're doing it in practice, because I think it was written for a certain reason, as Councilmember Higley mentioned, and then we're not following that currently as it's laid out in the protocol. So I'm glad we're doing this. I hadn't contemplated the idea of a subcommittee until Dr. Mitz brought it up, and so I think, how do you get into a meaty discussion without we get to the point up on the dais where people have a lot of fatigue and don't want to get into a meaty discussion. And the idea of having a special meeting on it, I think there's probably some folks, as evidenced by what Councilmember Higley just said, who don't think we need to do this at all. And others who just said, they do. And staff is saying there are some things that we're not following. So I don't know how we best navigate that forward, other than I do think that we need a guiding principle document that's different than just Rosenberg's rules off the shelf, and this is what we have. And so what we have should reflect the way we're operating, and it doesn't. So I think we do need to do something about it, but how we go about that, I'm open to. I mean, I'm a word nerd, so I don't mind sitting through a 4-hour council meeting where we're having a special meeting and going through it, or being on a subcommittee, but I know that for some others might feel really painful. So I also am fine to not be on a subcommittee, and then when it comes back to council, if there's, as Vice Mayor said, how do we navigate it if you're not on the subcommittee, but you have ideas of things, we have to do it in an open session. So that might also be painful for some, and I don't know the best way to make it less painful.
Yeah, just to clarify, I think it's important that we get this cleaned up. It's not that I'm saying it's not important and whatever, but I think there's a big chunk of this that is just kind of updating, vet it through council and get a red line. That said, I think to Councilmember Edwards' point, there are some things like Zoom. The only difference is we've done Zoom and then we didn't. And so we actually have some protocols that we used in the past with that I'm sure could be updated in the context of how things are today, but also with, when we started out, it was WebEx, not Zoom. And so there's some things, and I feel like that would be worth a discussion at council on how we fine tune it. And I think that's something that can happen up here. But the rest of it, I would be fine with the majority of this, to get an initial red line submitted, and then, then at that point we have a meeting, because I think where the value is not just revisiting it for us, like to your point, since 2020, it's not a document that gets refreshed all the time. And there's been a lot of technological updates, as well as state updates that we need to have in here. But I think it is valuable for the community as well to listen in on that discussion. And I think having a red line that we're discussing, kind of going into the weeds a little bit at a council meeting, I think would be valuable at some point. So that's kind of the format I was picturing.
Can I ask a clarifying question about what he just said?
Of course.
Are you saying you're asking staff to create the red line, or you're asking council to create the red line?
For staff to create the red line on some of these things that are, we need to update this, reflect current practice, some of that stuff, I would like staff to do that, and then come back to us with that. And then we could, whether it's, the city council, where was it? Some goal setting, an example like that might be a little bit more of a discussion up here. There might be some recommendations from staff, but that's kind of where I'm thinking is like the meat of this. I think a lot of this updates and recommendation, I think a lot of that flows through legal. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Vice Mayor?
Thanks. So my understanding with the recommendation that we have for a subcommittee is that one of the main things that they would do would be to chunk this up, and obviously I think we all acknowledge that there's parts of this that deserve more discussion than other parts. But I'd just like to get a little bit more of an idea of what city manager, what your idea is about how this subcommittee would function, what they would accomplish, what they wouldn't do.
Sure. Whether it be a subcommittee or the council, what I've done before on this and what I envision here is essentially, it's a fairly laborious process of walking through this document. From time to time, city councils update your protocols when you have a specific reason to do so, and you tackle one issue or a set of issues, and that's kind of discrete and you can get your head around it. That makes sense. You just put it on an agenda, you work it out, you update the text. In this case, the impetus is a little different. This document is just old. And as you all have noted, we're finding a bunch of things that are either needing to be updated for current practice, or new technology, or maybe just not there, or maybe just times have changed and this council wants to conduct business a little bit differently. So I think it makes sense really to just walk through the document. And a lot of these things we've suggested, I think we'll agree on, and they're mundane and they're editorial issues. And everybody kind of looks at each other and nods and just asks staff to do the red line, and that'll be pretty straightforward. But my hunch is that you're going to have a handful of things, some that we've identified and undoubtedly some that we didn't notice or didn't think of. Or maybe something that's not in the protocols, but somebody says this should be in the protocols and everybody says, okay, that's a great idea, but what are we going to do about it? And it's hard. I think that's a pretty lengthy process. So what I imagined with a subcommittee is even then take it in chunks. We'll have to see what the appetite, if there were to be a subcommittee, what the appetite of that group would be. In terms of frequency and length of meetings, I haven't really prejudged that at this point, but I could imagine getting together twice a month for an hour and change for 2 or 3 months, just to get through this document. And some things will be very simple, as I said, and others you'll say, staff, what are other cities doing? Go get us some examples, give us some ideas, draft up a couple of options and work through it. Some number of items from that list, then obviously the whole red line would come back to the council, either when we're done or perhaps at an interim step, if we feel like we're amassing a long list of things, and it's really important to do that status check. But ultimately, this would come back to council and we try to pick off and acknowledge everything that we think is non-controversial and get it down to whatever that number is of things that are really consequential, and work through those. So it's an iterative, as April said, it's an iterative process. It could swing back a couple of times. But my hope in having a subgroup would be you could kind of identify those places where you need some research, you need some analysis. It's not necessarily that the council will simply accept the recommendations of the subcommittee. That's not the goal. That's not really the point. Obviously, the full council needs to be comfortable with this. But to get us down to where there's a handful of things we need to talk about in this room, and we've picked off a lot of those smaller things. On our end, on the staff side, the amount of the work, the nature of the work and the amount of work is kind of the same, whether or not we do it with the whole group or a subcommittee. But I think Councilmember Kelly pointed out, I think 4 hours honestly is optimistic once you start getting into this. I have a hunch a number of things are going to come up that really warrant a lot of time. And I don't know what the appetite is for that, but more important than that, if those kind of long marathon sessions are necessarily conducive to our best work. So that's the thinking, is to be able to have a group that can be a little more agile and meet more frequently and take it off in chunks, recognizing that there's still going to be at some point a pretty long conversation, or 2 or 3 in this room to work on those significant issues, but hopefully we get that down to a short list.
So if I could add my 2 cents. It's council protocols, so I do think a subcommittee of council makes sense to be looking at it. I do agree that there'll be a lot of things that are fairly standard, easy. I read them today while I was watching TV again, and was interested in what you were saying, that there are things that we are following. There are a lot of things that, yes, we're doing exactly right. I also found something about Rosenberg's rules and where the mayor is allowed to make motions and second. So that, and the protocols trump the Rosenberg's rules if it differs. So I thought that was an interesting thing that we have in those.
And neither creates a right of action.
What?
Neither creates a right of action against the city.
Right. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. At any rate, I think partly the idea of bringing, redoing the protocols was mine, in that when we did the No on J measure, and I asked that if we do something like that's not local city stuff, that we have 100% requirement approval for it, or don't do it at all. So, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to look at that. So I think that's one thing that needs to be talked about. I think the other, and it's in the list of April's, but also I think the Zoom thing really isn't so much doesn't feel so much like a protocol as I guess it is, but it's more of a policy. And so it feels like those are kind of policy decisions versus protocol decisions. So it's like we could move those out to where the entire council has that discussion. And then anything else that comes up in that kind of arena that's more policy than protocol. So, and I would like to be on the subcommittee, I would offer myself up for that. So, Vice Mayor?
So what looks like a good way forward to me is that because I think the explanation for a subcommittee was good, and I think it's going to be important. But I think before that subcommittee begins its work, we have another agenda session to introduce any new ideas for consideration, and maybe at that time also say, we really need to break out the Zoom piece or whatever. This has got to be a separate conversation. This one has to be a separate conversation. The other stuff can be bundled, and kind of give the subcommittee a bit of a game plan. And then that subcommittee would just kind of do a lot of the bucket work on it, and before it came back. But I think that would make sense to go about it in that way.
Yeah, I do too. I like that idea. Go ahead.
Great arguments. I agree. So yeah, I think how you framed it, the subcommittee does make sense. And I think you and Councilmember Kelly would be a good combination if that's the direction we decide to go. Where I differ is I almost feel like I would like to have like a once over on what's there now. And then maybe the subcommittee brings back, hey, we need clarification on these, or we need a little bit more, this is, we need council discussion on this, like to your point about the Measure J thing, so you kind of pull that aside. Okay, this will be a little bit more discussion here, but you're kind of going through working with council to or with legal to update, some of these things that do need to be updated and fine tuned. And I think to your point, then we have kind of like the base that's kind of been vetted by the subcommittee. And then here are the 3, 4, whatever items that we need a little bit of discussion that we'd like to, discuss. And then I feel like that would be a good time, like, oh, well, I want to add this, I want to add that. Well, you're crazy, we don't want that, whatever the discussion is in terms of format. But I don't think, I'm open, but as I'm listening to this, I feel like that would be the cleanest way to at least get the base document. The subcommittee do a once over on that, and then we follow that with, hey, so we get an update, here's the clarifications, these are the updates, and then these are the discussion areas that we have. That's my thought.
And
Councilmember Edwards?
And when I'm mentioning Zoom, it's more the technical issues of it, like having a delay or having translation services. Those are kind of things to get into kind of the weeds on, not just whether we do it or not, but the actual process of how we go through it that works well for us as well as the community.
Okay. So open this up to public comment. Thank you.
At least that's what the protocols say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you. I think I'm a little early on this discussion, but I'm here, so I'm going to give my comment. I'm Sonia with Generation Housing, and my job really is to engage the community in work like you guys do at the meetings. And so I wanted to just give my plug for how important it is to open up the comments to Zoom. So I'm going to read what I have here. Generation Housing strongly supports the reforms the City Council is protocols that expand the opportunities for public participation and ensure that every voice in our community can be heard. In-person only participation creates barriers for many of our neighbors, working families, caregivers, seniors, people with disabilities, and those without reliable transportation. These residents should not be excluded from decisions that directly impact their lives and their neighborhoods. One example that comes to mind for me is I have somebody who would really like to be involved with what happens at council meetings, but she can't drive at night. So she is not able to make any comments. So allowing public comments via Zoom is not just about convenience, it is about equity. offering options which ensure that the people most affected by decisions on housing, land use, and community growth can fully engage in shaping the city's future. In addition, adding the estimated times to agendas, this is bane of my existence sometimes. It's not knowing when things are going to happen, so it would be easier for people to plan their participation. This simple step would help community members stay informed and increase engagement from people who otherwise cannot dedicate an entire evening to one meeting. Clear, accessible, and inclusive participation processes are essential to build trust and transparency in local government. They also lead to better decisions because they reflect the experience of a broader cross-section of Healdsburg residents. By embracing reforms, the council can ensure that local democracy is open to all and that housing, sustainability, and community growth decisions reflect the voices of the entire community and not just those who can be in the room. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? No? I'll bring it back. And we need to provide direction to staff. So is the direction a subcommittee?
I support that.
Yeah, I nominate Mayor Mitchell and Councilmember Kelly for the subcommittee.
I accept that nomination.
I accept that nomination.
So
I would second that then.
okay. Do we vote on that or no?
I get some clarification.
Okay.
We're looking at a subcommittee, but as Councilman Hagley suggested, that we have kind of a preview so we can set the stage for the subcommittee on items. Is that the clarity, or are we going straight to a subcommittee?
I was thinking go straight to the subcommittee to do the boring, I don't want to say boring stuff, but the deep dive.
It's the fun part.
I trust both Mayor Mitchell and Councilmember Kelly to be able to go through and come up with like, all right, this is something that we need to get fine tuned at council. The rest of it, I think, a red line where we can look at it and go, oh yeah, no, that makes sense, with some clarity type of things. But I think that was my thought, where they could do the initial deep dive, and then when it comes back to council, there might be, hey, this one section we felt it was important to have a discussion on, your Measure J thing, like, and some of these questions came up, and here, so we get a little presentation.
And
just let me I want to clarify too, the subcommittee would be working with the staff, right? Yeah. So it's not just us in a room by ourselves. Yeah. Okay. That's important.
And then the public would have the ability to comment, and then we would work on the issues that were important to the public if they spotted something in that.
Well, yeah, of course, anything when the subcommittee comes back to council is all public meeting and discussion. So, and any, if we're going to do this iterative process where we suggest these things need individual agendized comments, like maybe Zoom or I don't know, those things would, they'd be open to the public to comment on.
So I'm thinking that we might not see something as important to a member of the public, and they would want that item in the manual addressed. How would that?
So how I see it is they do the deep dive. Then we have a follow-up council meeting with, these are the things that need discussion. But part of that staff report is going to be their red line, whatever, here are the proposed changes on the deep dive that we get to take a look at. It's going to be in a public setting. The public has had a chance to review it when the agenda comes out. And there's certain areas, but it's open at that point where if there's other things that members of the public, well, you really need to include this, or the way the subcommittee did it, they didn't take into account this, or whatever it is. I mean, there will be a public forum where we can discuss that. But I think the initial working on updating, getting all the legislative updates and changes and things like that, I don't think that needs to be done from up here. And I'm very grateful that we have two volunteers that have stepped in.
Can I just say one other thing in response to that too? Remember, this is a protocol for council. It's not policy. So I think there's a really big distinction between those two things. I know that the public is interested in everything we do, which I appreciate, but the policy issues are the ones that I would really want to make sure that we got public comment and input on like the Zoom, like whatever else. In your idea of people coming, council coming with ideas of things we should address, those may be more policy driven as well that we want to talk about as well.
Yeah,
So-
it's simple little things. I can see how it can work out. It would be more open, and there would be public comment, and then because it was an agendized item, then we could talk about what someone made a public comment about and brought up. So that was my only concern, is that we didn't seem like we were doing this and not giving people who really read through everything the opportunity to really comment and dive in it. So thank you.
Sure. And Vice Mayor.
So Mike, yeah, I think this echoes what Councilmember Edwards was saying. If the subcommittee is going to come back to the council, that initial time should be fairly early in the process, I think, before a lot of the legwork has been done and the detailed work on that, so that we kind of agree on a game plan and interject new ideas at that point, having had some time to think about it. So, the subcommittee spend some initial month or two, whatever it is, doing that, comes back. And then, there's the game plan. These items will be broken out, whatever happens, whatever is suggested. And then there'll be another period of work for the subcommittee after that to do more of the detailed work. And then, and we'll just decide how much or what parts come back to the council at what time during that first kind of strategy session. Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense. Yeah. You got that's enough direction, right? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Good discussion. I didn't expect such a discussion, to be honest.
Mayor,
but I
Mitchell, if I
appreciate it.
may, can we get a vote on the subcommittee?
Oh, okay. Yes. So we'd like a motion on the subcommittee and a vote. We already have the motion.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. And then a vote, please.
Councilmember Edwards.
Yes.
Councilmember Higley.
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrod.
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, everyone. So now we're to council reports on matters of interest occurring since previous meeting, which we all have a long list now. So we'll just tag on to whoever says the first things first.
Mine's short.
Yours is short. Well, yours is, you want to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
I had a quick trip back to DC on behalf of NCPA, and with the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee, we sent out an RFP for representation in DC and interviewed a number of lobbying firms. Full day. It started bright and early, East Coast time, after flying in the night before. So that was fun. And then the following day, had meetings with the nominee for infrastructure, the undersecretary for infrastructure at the Department of Energy, who was very engaged in our topics ranging from wildfire issues to hydro and hydrogen and everything else. So it was a great conversation with her. And then we had a meeting with the Department of Interior on a number of other issues related to wildfires and access and things like that. And then came back, and the next day was in Murphy's for our annual commission meeting at Murphy's, where it also includes a barbecue with all the commission members in Murphy's, but we also met with members of the Calaveras County Water District, who we are partners with on some of the hydro facilities that we have there. So it's a really good chance to interact with the other board members in a very lovely setting in Murphy's. And then the next morning, we had our executive committee and commission meeting, where I was nominated to serve as chair of the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee for another year. And that's pretty much, I think, what I had.
Thank you. Councilmember Kelly?
Sure, I'll do my best. There's a lot of missing pieces. It's been a while. We adopted our budget for the Northern Sonoma County Air Pollution Control District for the upcoming fiscal year. And the Air District is in a really strong financial position. So I'm happy to report that
because of the geysers and other large emitter sites in our region, their fee structure allows for our district to be fully staffed and kind of operational, where a lot of other air districts are really struggling, especially the rural air districts. I was able to go to the cultural burn ceremony and prescribed burn on Fitch Mountain that took place late June, and it was really interesting to just see kind of where we're going and how these projects have evolved over time, which is wonderful to see the leadership and partnership of our fire department as well as all the other resources in our area. Was able to attend a number of Prune Packers games and was delighted that the Prune Packers won the league championship just this past weekend for the 5th year in a row. We are so proud of our home team. It's very exciting. And we are moving forward. You all remember at our last council meeting, well, maybe it's been a while, I almost remember, we moved forward with 5 recommended projects for SCTA RCPA. So we had our SCTA RCPA meeting in July to talk about the structure of how each city will be submitting projects and what that grant cycle will look like. So that'll be moving forward. We've already passed the submission deadline and prioritization deadline for all 9 jurisdictions plus the county. And so then the projects are now getting scored and they'll come back to us at SCTA RCPA, where then we fight, as hard as we can to bring home the funds for our communities. And I also was able to attend Wine Country to the Rescue, which is a fundraiser for both Healdsburg Fire as well as Northern Sonoma County Fire, or the district up north. And so that was a wonderful community event. And Mike McGuire, as usual, just is the Energizer Bunny out there with his auction skills. I don't even remember. It was something to do with Guy Fieri. I don't know, but it was hilarious. And I hope we can all attend. Councilmember Hagley was there as well. I hope we can all attend that event next summer. They usually do it every year in July, which I know is tricky for our time off. And then I think that was pretty much it. Yep. What did I miss? Oh, we had a ribbon cutting of a new olive oil company, and there are a number of ribbon cuttings. We have a lot of new businesses opening in town, and they're all happening right now. So that was exciting to see, and really just so happy that we have so many new small businesses or other folks coming into town, making sure those storefronts stay full. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Edwards.
Chris and I went to a lot of ribbon cuttings over the time. There was the new Bistro Landnape, which is in the old camp. Landnappy, which is in the old Camp Fino location. That was a nice one. The Olive Press, which was nice to have a non-wine tasting operation open on the plaza. The rebranding of Hotel Lamar's to 27 North. To try to attract a younger audience to work better with Little Saint events, which they're hoping to capitalize. W Real Estate opened a new office on Healdsburg Avenue. LaRouche, which is a honey and mead business, which is just down the street from Cousteau's. Attended a really good presentation that Director Zimmer did on projects. And I think it was the real takeaway from that was really explaining to our residents of how projects get scored in the SCTA grant process. So really, we have some residents that want this area fixed, but then when you hear how all the scoring criteria works together, it makes sense on why we're approaching the projects we're approaching. So I really appreciate that presentation. The library reopened, where we were all there. The big one was the Gala Gitza, which was incredibly colorful. I mean, the photos that were taken at that event, the color, the vibe was just really nice on that one. And then one of the important things last week was the Senior Advisory Committee meeting. They are really moving forward on the Compassion Community Pilot Program. And I think that the important thing that they have done is they've reached out and identified that the needs of our Hispanic community are slightly different. And they weren't aware of that when they went in there and what they're looking for at this time of passing. And so it was really nice. They've come out with a nice one-page brochure that'll be in both English and Spanish, and they're continuing to work on that. And it's really nice to see when something goes from a goal to really moving forward. And that, I think that that's going to be a very important program. And it's unfortunately something we all have to deal with at some point in time. So I think it's nice that we as a community recognize that we're an aging community and that we are really addressing the needs of our community at all ends of the spectrum, not just at the upper end. And I believe that.
Great. Vice Mayor?
Well, you missed one ribbon cutting, and I forget it was. I'm spacing on the name. Naila.
Oh,
do you know?
right.
Nayeli.
Thank you. And yeah, it was a non-chamber ribbon cutting, and it was a very meaningful, wonderful event. A lot of community members were there to support that new business, and so it was great to attend and support there. The library opening was super memorable. They did such a great job on that building and the whole facility and the whole asset to our communities. It's strengthened, and it's really going to be enjoying a wonderful new period there. So that was a happy event. I went to the Association of Bay Area Governments meeting in San Francisco. It was not a lot to report, and there was a lot of procedural stuff that got worked out during that meeting, but it was good to be there and touching with that. There was the CEO roundtable event. I got to hear a lot of concerns and worries, frankly, from the business community. So a lot to digest from that meeting and to work on in the future here. Also, there was a chamber board meeting that I attended, and I filled in for Councilmember Kelly at the Arts and Culture Commission. And I guess one thing worth mentioning is that there does seem to be a growing communication between the arts people and the business people on their common interests, and that's really a positive thing. I think there's a lot of fruitful conversations that can happen that have started already there on both sides. So I was with both groups within a couple of days of each other, and so I was really grateful to see that was going on. And then music on the plaza, the 4th of July event, super fun, dunk tank, epic. I would definitely do that again. And Prune Packer games, it's a really wonderful summer in Healdsburg, not too hot this year, really great. And the Gala Gets it also super memorable. Glad to know that it's going to be coming back. Presumably, I think that's the plan. And I sure hope so, because it just fits right in, and it was so enjoyable. I went twice that day. Thanks.
So I don't have a whole lot to add to that. The Chamber CEO roundtable was interesting with you and City Manager. You were there, and City Manager. That was right at the end of the beginning of our vacation, I guess. Library reopening. Also, there was a welcome back at the library where they had kids face painting and clowns, and it was just amazing. There were so many kids there having a great time. And 4th of July, the kids parade with Fire Chief Boaz and Vice Mayor and I got to be the judges. It was an amazing day, and the kids were great, and so that was fun. Also, nobody mentioned, I can't believe you haven't mentioned this, the Sajo Hills ribbon cutting ceremony. I mean, come on. It was hot, but I mean, that's a huge thing, right? Yeah. And then the other thing I wanted to share is that I've been invited to and have been included in a couple of meetings of a group of mayors related to homelessness situation. It's kind of, we have no authority, we have no, real mandate other than to get together. We have mayors north, south, east, and west is kind of the way they've developed it. So that's how I'm on there for the North County. We're with Nolan Sullivan, the new head of DHS, and Chris Corsi attends, and Gentleman Homes. So it's kind of I wanted you to share that because we're participating and kind of hopefully coming up with, I don't know exactly what, other ideas about how to address the homeless issue and monies really in the county. So we have an audience with a couple of county people, so that's a good thing. And that's all I have. You have something else?
Yeah, I forgot. I attended. I think Councilmember Kelly and Edwards were at the SCTCA grant input meeting that Larry and his team put on, and that was super informative and really did learn a lot about all the projects that are afloat and the money that's out there and how we're approaching that. And so thank you for that presentation. And I hope you got some meaningful input from that. I was glad to be there. I just wanted to mention for the future, coming up this Saturday is the Zucchini Festival at the Farmers Market. I'll be participating in that. I would just like to put that out there. And then Wednesday night, the library is doing another opening sort of event at 6 o'clock too. So if you missed the first one, this is another celebration for the library.
And we did have one more ribbon cutting. There's a nice new spa that opened up here on Hudson Street.
Okay.
I was busy with ribbon this holiday.
Thank you, everyone. So for that, I'll adjourn the meeting at 8.